Well, good evening, everyone. I see many familiar faces out there. I'm afraid I don't remember all the names. But anyway, it would be nice to see you again sometime. Perhaps if we come to Chennai or if you come to Ananda village at some point. That would be very nice to get acquainted with you. But for now, I guess we'll have to do it virtually. And so I thought I would just say a few words about something that I had been thinking about recently, which is memory. And I remembered some things from my childhood, which had resurfaced at a later time. I grew up in California, where we are now, and where we lived was on a farm. And the area of California where we live is very hot in the summer. It's a bit like Delhi. And so my parents had a cabin in the woods up in the mountains. And it was a very nice place. I remember it vaguely. I was very small, like 4 years old, but I remember it strongly. I remember how nice it was. It was cool and quiet, and it was rustic. And also, it had a wonderful smell. The smell came from the trees where the cabin was. It was in a grove of cedar trees, and I loved that smell. Well, we went there many times in the summers, but by the time I was going to school, my parents sold the cabin and we no longer went there. And I was a bit disappointed, of course, but life went on and I began to forget about most of the things that I experienced there. But I didn't forget the smell of the cedars. And so years went by and I grew up and I eventually came to Ananda, and I was one day out walking, and I walked up a hill and into a grove of cedars. I didn't realize that's what they were until I took a deep breath. And the whole experience of my childhood place where I went with my family for vacations, the whole thing came back to me, and I didn't remember every detail of how it looked, but I remembered how nice it was and what a pleasant place it was to be. And one of the things that made it pleasant was that wonderful smell of the cedars. And I read about memory a bit, and how important it is, and the sorts of things that will awaken memory. And so that was one very good example of how memory can be awakened years after perhaps something has happened where you've had some experience. Well, then there was another one. That one's a bit more recent, and it took place when I was already grown up. But I had, throughout my life, I had stories told to me as well as books given to me and so forth. And I had a book which was a real favorite of mine. I'm surprised it hasn't completely fallen apart, but I read it many, many times. It was about it was again a children's book for somebody about 5 years old. It was about a forest and some forest animals who were driven out of their homes by a forest fire. They all ran from their homes and they ran down the hill to the river. They all gathered there and they, spent their day or several days thinking about what they could do and hoping to rescue any of them that were missing. And so they got together after a day or two, and they began to talk about what will we do now? We've all lost our homes, and how can we live, and how can we manage all of this? And they decided to work together as a group, as a team. And so the beaver went out and made a dam across the river so that they could use the water more easily. The squirrels went off and they gathered acorns. There were other animals who did all sorts of very helpful and useful things that very many would. But they all worked together and they worked as though they were a family. They, everybody did whatever needed to be done and whatever they could do. And so they managed to build themselves a new home without having to worry about, well, I have my home, but you'll just have to, everybody else will just have to fend for themselves. No, everyone went out and they did everything they could that they knew how to do to help each other make themselves a new home. There was only one that was missing, one animal that was missing. It was a rabbit. And it was the mother rabbit of a little rabbit that was there. And everyone in that group began to take care of the little rabbit and took her in. She had a home. And so this went on throughout that summer and into the fall, and finally until it was Christmas time. And I didn't know that forest animals did Christmas, but I guess these did. And in the last chapter of the book, there's a huge Christmas tree, a really large Christmas tree that went clear up into the sky and covered with all sorts of beautiful things. And so they were having a Christmas celebration. And there was a noise outside, and in came the little rabbit's mother. So this was a wonderful, happy ending to the story. But what stayed with me, that story, I never forgot that story. That story stayed with me throughout my entire life. And what it was that was so meaningful to me was the fact they worked together to do something as a community. And here I am living in a spiritual community. I came here looking for that. I knew I was looking for that. I, of course, didn't know about Ananda for a long time, but it was given to me as a surprise, really. I had some friends in college who, some mutual friends, maybe a half a dozen or so, and we sort of saw each other from time to time, and then one of them would disappear, or all of them, or many of them would disappear. But once in a while, I would see one or two of them from time to time. And after college, I had gone back there to that same town, and I was visiting somebody, I'm not sure who, but I happened to meet somebody that I had known in that time period. And I asked him what he was doing, because I hadn't seen him in a couple of years. And he said, oh, I'm staying up in the mountains in California here, up in a forest, and I'm caretaking some property for a man who is going to open a meditation retreat. Well, for quite some time, I had been looking for a place to learn to meditate. And here it was, my opportunity right there in front of me. And so of course I said, can I come and visit this retreat? And he said, yes, but not now, because it was still winter. It was lots of snow on the ground. But I was able to go in the spring, to go there and learn to meditate and become part of a community, just like the one that I learned about from that book when I was very small. I was able to do all of these things partly because of these memories that didn't go away. They were strong in me. And so when the time came and the opportunity came, I knew that was what I wanted, because I'd already learned about it from a book and from my own desire. And so once again, we have another example of how important and how useful It is when we can remember things, whether they're in a book or they're told to us by someone else, or we've seen something perhaps, whatever it is. These things that make our memory awaken are very, very important. And so I would like to suggest to you that if you have memories of things, write them down if they're important. Make sure that there's a way that they will come back to you at the right time. So, Jaya to you.
Patanjali said that the spiritual path can actually be described as one of memory, smriti. And that really what we're doing is we're remembering that which we truly are, and we've obscured it. And so oftentimes when we have these memories, especially memories as children, that stick with us and we forget them at times, there's some, oftentimes they're a glimpse of things that have happened to us in the past lives, past impressions, past incarnations that are propelling us. And it's perhaps not always the specific memory itself, the details, but the general thrust of the energy behind that memory that is impelling us. And if we pay attention to those things, we can begin to actualize those things and begin to, you might say, work out that karma in a good way. It's the same thing with friends. Master said that if you meet, it's important for us to try to meet again those friends with whom we've had a close connection in the past, and to fulfill that relationship and bring that relationship to a higher plane. And we help each other this way. And so you can see that when we go through life, we meet certain people and we feel a certain familiarity, as though I know this person. And when you have that feeling, pay attention to it. Now, this, of course, leads me to a discussion of when I first met Swami Kriyananda. I had that feeling. I immediately liked him. I met him in Berkeley, California, where I was a student. I had recently graduated, and I met him. And he seemed very familiar to me in some way. I didn't remark on it at the time, but when I look back, I could see that there was a resonance that was created by that. So when he indicated that he'd like to get to know me a little bit better, I immediately responded to that and began to visit him. And in his house, in his flat, which in those days was in San Francisco. Well, from that first meeting and from those meetings with Swamiji and visiting him in San Francisco, it was out of that energy that Ananda Village began to take shape, that meditation retreat that Sadhana Devi was speaking about. This was back in the late 1960s, was beginning to take shape. And it was out of that eventually our community came, which is now Ananda Village. And of course, as you know, in another week or so, we're going to have this 50th anniversary of our founding, which would been, we've chosen that time when we bought this property, which became what's now known as Ananda Village. We had purchased already before that, 2 years prior to that, the property that became that meditation retreat that Sadhana Devi was referring to. But as that property began to fill up with people, and many more people were coming to respond to this idea of community, to learn meditation, yoga, it was obvious that that property was not going to be sufficient to do what we wanted to do. So we bought, Swamiji initiated this search for property, and not too far away from that first property, we bought a large piece of land, many hundreds of acres. In those days, land was cheap. This was a bit of an out-of-the-way place, and so the land was not as expensive. Now, we probably couldn't afford it now. Land prices have gone up so much. But in those days, it was relatively cheap. And we began this community in July of 1969. So this makes the 50th anniversary, and that's what we're celebrating. in this coming couple of weeks, in the first week of July. And we expect now, the latest count is we're going to have we have so far about 850 registered to join us. We'll see how many come, but that's the registration number. I suspect it'll be more than that because nobody ever always registers. People just show up. But so it should be quite a fun event. Now, while we're doing this, we're going to be having, during the week, we're going to have a week's long series of classes and discourses about many subjects, many times a day. And of course, many of us have been asked to make presentations. So I'd like to share with you a couple of thoughts. If you happen to be one of those 11 who are coming, you may hear me talk about this further again, so I might repeat myself. But I think since most of you are not coming, that won't happen. But I've been asked to speak a little bit about the starting of the community, how you could say our community, a new type of energy, a new age energy was able to express itself and create a community. And over the years, this question has been asked of me often. People wanted to know, how did you get started? Why did you get started? You got started as a community. Many other communities tried to get started. And some did, and we're not the only such in adventure here in America and in other parts of the world. But out of all of those that get started, maybe 1 out of 100 succeeded for any length of time. So and people have asked us what's your secret? In other words, give us the system by which we can do that too. And we're not ever able to do that, because one of the principles that we started with here is Swami Kriyananda didn't believe in systems. That the human mind, and especially the intellectual mind in today's world, tries to figure out what's the perfect system. And I suspect when we speak about social organization, people have been trying to determine what's the perfect governmental system, what's the perfect social system, what's the perfect way to organize this or that or another thing. And if I can just get the right system, other people can replicate it. And it can be just like cookies, we could cookie cutter, we could make many cookies just like that. Swami didn't believe that. He didn't work that way. And so it's been very difficult for us to be able to say, well, here's what you do. If you do what we did, this end result. He didn't believe in systems. No, because any system will work if you have the right people. Could be, it could be a strange, goofy system, and it'll probably work if you have good people. And on the other hand, you can have the perfect system, but if you have people who are disharmonious, people who are negative, no matter how perfect your system is set up, how you organize your center, in order to put it into right now, if you have the perfect center environment, you have the perfect center classes set up. If you have people that are negative and can't get along together, no center is going to work. It doesn't matter what you do. But you can have a chaotic center, and it seems to be totally a mess. But if you have good people, it's going to work. There's no problem. So it starts with people. And this is what Swami, now this is, when you're trying to explain this to other people who want to start something like we did, this is a little discouraging to them, because it's hard to get people to get positive people to work together is not so easy. But this is how Swami started. He felt that the most important thing was to get people with good hearts who wanted to do something positive and had a good positive energy flow. And so Swami's job in this was to keep the energy flow high, keep that vibration high. And one way to do that was to present and encourage people to, maybe the better word is inspire, to inspire people to a high ideal. People who wanted to reach that ideal. Now, because you can see, not everybody is seeking high ideals in this world, but there are many people that are. Many people that are seeking high ideals. And so Swami focused upon inspiring individuals toward a higher ideal. Or you could say that in another way. He focused on trying to uplift people's consciousness. And there's something interesting begins to happen when a person's consciousness is uplifted. And I think this is very subtly one of the secrets of our success as Ananda, but it's not limited to us. It could be the success of any group. Group dynamics, you might say, especially in the spiritual realm, are based upon this principle. When people's consciousness is raised higher, there is naturally a sense of inclusiveness, a sense of expansion, a sense of wanting to share with other people, a sense of higher ideals wanting to be expressed. It happens naturally when a person is elevated and inspired. And so consequently, if you're not inspired, and if your consciousness is in a downward trend, you're not going to be able to create those qualities or those attitudes that make a community of people working to, what is a community? It's people working together toward common goals and common, in our case, common ideals, common principles. But if people are inspired, and if people's consciousness is uplifted, you don't have to force that. It comes naturally from within people. Now, Swami Sri Yukteswar made an interesting statement. As you know, from what he taught, we are in an age of uplifted of rising consciousness. Now, this is a long rhythm, Dwapara Yuga. There is an upward flow of greater energy cosmically bathing us, and as the generations progress at this time in history, there's an natural environmental upliftment of consciousness taking place. Slow rhythm, but nevertheless, it's moving in that direction. So as we progress in that direction, when consciousness is raised, Swami Sri Yukteswar said the heart of individual seekers will naturally begin to open. People will want, and as the heart begins to open in a higher age, people will naturally want to seek truth. This is something, because it's how we are made as souls. And as we seek truth, we will want to naturally associate with others who share those ideals of seeking truth. And so this is something that's naturally being propelled by the direction of cosmic evolution in this age. People are wanting to come together, and as they come together, they begin, in this way, they form community, the community of truth seekers. I see all of you. I see probably about 20 people, at least on my screen. There may be more there, but I can see on my screen about 20. This is a community of people of truth seekers who have come together, impelled because you have been inspired for some reason, and it naturally, it's like a magnet. It begins to draw us together into that. And this is why I think, I may be wrong on this, but I believe this is what the Master said. In the future, the ideal of community, of people coming together in community and consciously trying to express these high principles and ideals, will be a social pattern of the future. Now, it may not be in my lifetime, in your lifetime, when this happens widely, and maybe not in our grandchildren's time even, because we're speaking long rhythms here. But Yoganandaji said, this idea in this coming age of Dwapara will spread like wildfire, because it's natural to the human heart to seek out others who are truth seekers. And so in a sense, this is what Swami, the way Swami began. He said, let's, in his mind, he was saying, uplift consciousness, and in that upward flow, that's my job, is to uplift that, to get that energy moving in a positive direction and help it to keep it uplifted. And so consequently, Swami, his whole life was one of emphasizing positivity, of approach to life. And he liked to use the word saying yes to life. Say yes to life. And when you say yes, the doors open for solutions. And he says, avoid being problem conscious. In other words, everything you look at in life, oh, that's a problem, that's a problem, that's a problem, and on and on. They're all problems, but it doesn't mean we ignore the problem. But he gave us a suggestion. He says, if you see a problem, something needs fixing. Well, if you noticed it needed fixing, who is the best person to fix it? You, the person who noticed it. Instead of saying, this needs fixing, hey, come and fix this. No, so you say, take action. It's our job to act. And so consequently, this was a wonderful thing that I discovered when at Swamiji we started this community, is it gave, I'm speaking personally now, but I think others also held this point of view. It gave us a chance, gave me a chance to do something. I'm a physical, I like to do things, I like to act. So it gave me an opportunity to creatively act, because when we started this community, there was a lot of things that needed fixing. Everything needed fixing, or there wasn't anything to fix. First, we had to make something and then figure out how to fix it. But I love that. And just to be able to do something, to finally be useful, I felt a sense of usefulness. And so consequently, and with that, feeling positive about what I was doing, there was an inspiration. And when we're in the same thing I saw in my fellow community members, and I saw in the fellow people, we were inspired to do something. And Swami had the ability to focus that inspiration in a particular direction. And for us, it wasn't a focus in a specific worldly sense, but it was in a spiritual sense. We were here to do service to a high ideal. Live your life for high ideals. Or as Yogananda would say, plain living, high thinking. And to then look for opportunities to express high ideals in action and not make it philosophy only. Many people tend toward the philosophical side, especially when there's a job to be done. People, other people are people when a job to be done, they pick up the tools and say, "Let me at it," and that's but you want to do that, and this is what the opportunity was for those people who want to act and want to express. And I think all of you wouldn't be there if you didn't have high ideals. Our challenge, and this is the challenge that has been given to us. I got to look at the clock here. Oops. This is the challenge that has been given to us by our master. Yogananda, he came with so many teachings and specific things that he wanted people to do. He says, if you do but 10% of what I say, you'll get there. And he gave all of this spectrum of possibilities. And our job, and I think he left it to future generations, and our generation, your generation, mine, both, our job has been to take those principles that have been handed down to us and to take them from philosophy into action. And because otherwise, they remain simply thoughts, good intentions. You know, they say the road to the other place down is paved with good intentions. We have to actually act. And in that action, we become blessed by putting something into action. You know, Yogananda made an interesting point about religion. He says religion needs to be useful. If it doesn't change our lives for the better, what use is it? And so consequently, just to do something religiously and it has no positive effect for us, it sees that that's not true religion. Religion has to be able to change us for the better. And the way it does that is we take the principles of religion and we bring it down into practical use. And Swamiji would repeat often what Yoganandaji said. He said, we must have ideals, obviously. We have to have a goal. We have to have something we're striving for. He says, be practical in your idealism. In other words, bring your idealism down so your feet are on the ground. So it's real. It's not merely philosophy and just good ideas. And you'll find that is not easy to do. It's just because it takes it takes sacrifice to actually go to work and do something. You have to compromise. You have to make it so it works. Swami always used to say, do what works. And this is what it works in the big frame of things. In other words, brings happiness, brings soul evolution, brings upliftment. This is a good guiding principle. And so all of these principles are things that we're this coming week, not this week, week after next, we're going to be talking about for 1 week of classes and get-togethers with many hundreds of people that are coming to Ananda Village. And so it's going to be a fabulous chance to share. This will be broadcast on live streamed. So maybe at the center, you could, if some of you may have, probably the timings might be a little awkward, but 12 and a half hour differences. But nevertheless, if you're interested, these will be live streamed and you can go on the websites and find out the details for that. But rather than me babbling along here and Sadhana babbling along, I wanted to leave some time for you to ask questions. And is there something that we might be able to share with you that you would like to ask? And so I know it's always hard for the first person to ask a question. So somebody's going to have to break the ice, you might say. And so who will it be?
I'm going to leave a few seconds before I do that.
Come on. Don't be shy. Don't be shy. Somebody has to be first.
All right.
Okay, Sadhana, now Lithia, now so while he's asking this question, you got to be thinking of the question that's going to follow. Okay.
Yes.
Sadhana, what's your question?
This is something that came to me recently. I have been thinking that the things that I wanted to change in myself when I started on coming into Ananda are not the same now. Because in the beginning,
Yeah.
and I spoke to a few other friends here, and I found out almost everybody that I spoke with had the same thing. We all come with a battle plan, and it falls apart in the first few months. And then as years pass, we realize that, okay, this is going to take a lot more work than I thought it would. And and then we sort of settle into the longer rhythms. So on one hand, when we look back at the past few years, like in myself for the past 5 or 6 years, there are some things that are very encouraging. The change that has happened without me even knowing about it. But on the other hand, there are some of the mental citizens who are still sitting on the benches and I don't want in there. So I was since you spoke about memories and longer rhythms, I wanted to ask, what are some of the things that we can see in ourselves and look at the longer rhythms and feel more encouraged and inspired on the spiritual path as we go?
So, okay, the question is about longer rhythms. You know, you've noticed something I think all of us notice that sometimes we come onto this spiritual quest and we have certain ideas and expectations and things that are important. And a little after a while, they go, we, they're not important after a while because our perspective begins to change. And one of the things that does definitely change is your sense of time and the sense of might say that you come to realize that, oh my God, this is a bigger job than I had ever anticipated. And that what I thought, because you become more self aware of your own limitations, your own, the different obstacles that you have to overcome. And that can be discouraging on one hand, which we shouldn't let it be. But on the other hand, because your sense of time and how you begin to realize how long you already have been working on these things. And you realize that when you first came, you probably thought, oh, self-realization would probably take me 2-3 years, and everything. I'll be swimming in samadhi, and it doesn't work that way. But I remember an insight that I had. I had been meditating. I had come onto this path, and it probably been about 2 years, maybe 3 years. And I realized that I looked at myself, and it was you could say it was a revelation to myself that I came to the firm conclusion that it was God that I wanted in this lifetime. I was looking for all these other things. Even when I was meditating because I wanted this or that or some other thing. But then I came to the realization that no, all of those things were on the surface. What I really wanted was God. And then simultaneously, I had the realization that I would dedicate this life toward that goal of trying to fulfill that. And I realized that it was a complete lifetime that had to be given. If you don't commit for a lifetime, if you say, well, I'll give it 5 years, I'll give it 10 years, you'll never get there that way. You have to be 100%. I'll give the lifetime. Now, you might say, well, I could give many lifetimes, but you're not in control of the future. So you can only really control this lifetime if you can control it at all. And I think you realize that really Babaji's in control, or Master's in control, really, and if you step aside. But when you realize that I'm in this for the long haul, I'm in this for a lifetime, you put that sense of timing begins to go away. It doesn't matter. And so if God comes to me in a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, it really that sense of time tends to, for me at least, it tended to disappear because this was what I was going to do. And it wasn't a matter of doing something else at some other time. This was who I was. And when that feeling came, there was a great rest, a calmness came into me because I understood there was no alternative really after that. And not because I wanted another alternative, there just was no alternative. Seeking God is the only thing that life is about, really. And we can get distracted at times. We all do, from here to there. But the reality is that seeking God is what it's all about. So don't become discouraged, because if you become discouraged, you're still time bound in that because you have this expectation. And now it's a little bit of a paradox because we do expect God to come, and we call for God to come. Why aren't you coming? Come. So we have to have that fervor, but at the same time, you say, well, I don't know how long it's going to take, but it's whatever it takes, I'm here, and I'm going to be here, and that anxiety about it. For me, at least, it went away. So I don't know. Would you like to say that about longer rhythms?
Longer rhythm. Yes, I guess it's also, I suppose, in the practice of longer rhythms, you begin to take a look at all your things that you have in your life that are seemingly important. And I suppose it helps if you can prioritize them at least. And instead of having this sort of big pot full of things you just really, really, really want right now and you're not going to give up and so forth. Instead of that, if you can choose the things and start to look at them and say, okay, how important is this? Is this really going to bring me peace? Is it going to bring me happiness? Is it going to bring me God? I think maybe that is a big step toward realizing that what you really want and the only thing you really want is God.
We have time for one more question.
I don't have a question, but maybe my name is Lakshmi. Hello, and
Yes, yes.
maybe I have this one to offer. Like when I came to Ananda, I think I thought that these are the things I need to set in me and all that. And probably I thought that somewhere towards the end, all these things are going to happen. I think this was during Swamiji's birthday week. We had a long meditation, and for the first time, I didn't know that I had this much of heaviness in me. It was only when that some kind of an opening happened. It's like for the first time, I felt relief. What was the relief? I can't explain. That was relief. I didn't know that there was something called room in your heart that you could breathe this much. So, thank you. Thank you.
You know, this is going back to longer rhythms. Just always remember, this is a journey that we have been on. We think we have come together here for the first time onto this seeking of this path in this lifetime. And it's unlikely to be the case. We've been on this road, this pathway for a long time. And I think you recognize something as you come, like this is we're just saying here, you come and you recognize something and your heart just responds to it because it's familiar to you. And you say, yes, that's what I recognize that. I remember that. Going back to where we started, it's memory. It's as if it's as if it seems so familiar because in the deepest sense, it is familiar. This is who we are, what we are, and it's just being revealed to us again. But as Master said, when Swami asked him, well, why does it take so long? I mean, that was the question Swami asked Master, because he had asked Master, have I been your disciple before? And Master said, oh, yes, many times. And Swami asked, well, why does it take so long? He says, well, people, they come and they get pulled away by this or that, one thing and another, pulls them away again and again and again. And you might say, as Master said in his autobiography, whims and fancies. You know, whims and fancies come and they pull us off in all these directions, but then we come back again. And we recognize until finally we say, no, this is what I want. And everything outside of our lives change, it comes and it goes. But we hang on to that central core. I know over the years, having been on this path for 50 years, I've met many people who have been disciples and come onto this path, but then they've left and gone somewhere else. And they've done other things in their life. And sometimes I'll meet them again. And I always ask, I don't want to intrude on their life, but I'll ask, are you still disciple? Are you still seeking? And if they say yes, oh yes, yes, then I just rejoice because maybe they've gone in a different outward direction, but they're still seeking. And I think this is for us, wherever our outward life or outward adventure takes us. That's just our karma, perhaps. The important thing is to always keep alive that quest, that is probably whatever it is that brought you here to this satsang, that impelled you to seek something higher, some higher value, some higher truth. We have to nourish that. And if that keeps it nourished, and whatever your outward journey might be, that's karma takes you here or there, keep that alive. Keep that alive. And in the sense, I asked you about being a disciple, because then if you keep that contact with Guru, no matter what happens outside, you'll be protected. And it may take a little extra time, perhaps, for him to pull you in, but nevertheless, like a fish, he's reeling you in, and then you're going to fight, till finally you say, "Okay, God, enough is enough," and then he can really win it. You might say, out of this ocean of delusion, back to your true home. Well, it's been nice having the satsang together, and we've done this before, but it's been a long time, so it's been
Yes.
we'll have this more frequently because this was fun. I enjoyed this very much. So we're going to conclude. Sadhana Devi, Sadhana's going to end with the prayer, and then we'll chant Om together.
Divine Mother,
Divine Mother,
Heavenly Father,
Heavenly Father,
great Gurus,
great Gurus,
we bow to you all.
we bow to you all.
Guide us throughout our lives.
Guide us throughout our lives.
Help us always to choose the highest path.
Help us to always choose the highest path.
Make us perfect instruments
Make us perfect instruments
of thy love and thy joy,
of thy love and thy joy,
that we may share thy blessings
that we may share thy blessings
with all whom we meet.
with all whom we meet.
Shanti, Shanti.
Now let's rub our hands together and let's send this blessing out into the world, chanting Om 3 times. Om. 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 God bless all of you, and I hope to see some of you here at Ananda Village, maybe a few of you,
Yes.
Prasanna, maybe some others, and oh, good, there's a few. And then if not, perhaps we'll have a chance to cross paths in Chennai, or maybe even